Join Paula and Deanna as we discuss the power of positive thinking and the ins and outs of what it really means to be awesome, do awesome, and feel awesome every day. Stay tuned. It's time for Key Talks. So where we left off, we had John Rivero, CEO and founder of Key Creative, for our inaugural episode explaining who we are and what we do, and just, I don't know, I don't want to say bells and whistles, but just the things that make us great, and we know that our clients feel it too. Yeah. And one of the things that we left off on was this concept of awesome, where it's way more than just a word for us. We literally have it painted behind me on our mural up there.
We have it everywhere.
Everywhere.
And I know that there's this like multi-part definition that I don't have memorized, the one about the dictionary, one step, one layer after another, to this very pure and powerful perspective of being awesome, of identifying your own awesome.
Yeah.
And for today's episode, we don't have any special guests other than just ourselves, just Deanna and Paula. But Paula here has published this book in front of us. Was it last year?
It was last year. I think it's going to be a year in September that it's
Yeah, I think that's
out.
when they came out.
Yes,
the boxes,
I'm pretty sure it was September. Yeah, so it's been out there. I've been sharing its vibe and energy, and so I self-published it last September. And maybe before I get into that, like awesome is such a key, pun intended, word here at Key Creative. Awesome is, I said that, right? Awesome is such a key, pun intended, word here at Key Creative. And I think it's important. We may have talked a little bit about it last episode, but it's very intentional. Like, we use it very intentionally here at Key Creative. And as John shared, and he said it very specifically, like the dictionary-based definition, but it's really, and I was looking it up again even today, but it came from the word awe, and awe being inspiring. And when we started digging in deeper to what that word could mean for us, I think things that stood out was that awe is feelings of fear and wonder. And I think when we saw those two words, it really piqued our curiosity. Like, we were like, fear and wonder? Like, that's really neat. Because generally when you think of awesome, you're not thinking of something like scary or fearful or terrifying. But I also think there's something really beautiful about the word fear. So we can sit with that for a second. So then when we looked up fear and wonder, it's respect for something that's amazing, surprising, beautiful, and powerful. And when John read that to me, I was completely moved, like in the way that I knew and he knew that awesome was the word that needed to penetrate through Key Creative and into the community and with the children, families, and schools that we serve. And so awesome became part of our vision, Create Your Awesome. It's part of our vision of creating meaningful learning and celebrating the strengths and talents of children, families, and schools that make them awesome. It's at the core of our why, that we do things because we believe every person is awesome, even though they may have beliefs that they're not good enough, which is why we have the "you are awesome," but you can also create and discover your awesome. So we never want anyone to feel ashamed or afraid or intimidated if they can't think about what's awesome about them, because we can create that and we can do that together. So Such an important word, has so much intention. We probably, to people outside of our community, way overuse the word, but I never feel bad for it because I know when I say it, what I mean. And I know the importance and value that it has within me. And when I express it to others, what it means when I share it with them. So the book, I think I wasn't planning on writing a book. That was never the intention necessarily, maybe subconsciously, but I remember just sitting down, sketching in my journal and just being so drawn by the idea of like creating your awesome. And like, I'm also really love personal development and the self-help and the idea of always growing and learning to be, do, have, and give the best version of myself. So that's always been a part of me. And so writing something like this did come naturally in that way. So when I was sketching in my little journal, I had little Post-it notes and little characters, and Oosh, our mascot owl here at Key Creative, was part of that. He didn't make the cut in the book. I apologize. But it came to be what it is, and I'm very proud of it. I think the whole idea, like the book says on the back that I'm looking at, is that it's all about building self-esteem and loving your amazing, surprising, beautiful, and powerful self. Because I think nowadays and every day, I just see so many people struggling to do that, including myself. And I see the struggle, but I also see so much beauty in every single person. And if we could all just see that in ourselves and celebrate that within ourselves, that would be my wish. That would be my wish, that we could all see how much beauty and awesomeness we all have inside of us. And it starts young. Our self-talk and our beliefs about ourselves, I think, starts at such a young age, which is why the children's book was important, so that it could be a something that I could share with young children. So it's really, I think, targets visually, for sure, ages, I'd say 4 to 9, but the message is universal. Like, I recite that poem. There's a poem in the book that I really wanted to have a poem because I love little jingles and I like being able to repeat them and say them. And so I recite it every day personally. And I do that usually every day. If I'm driving my kids to school, we'll recite the poem as well. But that's my belief in positive thinking, and having that type of belief system is a practice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been thinking, as you mentioned this, how, like, I don't know if it's just like in the clinical space, how like this intervention is so effective, or repeated sessions of this will reach the goals that you want. But at the end of those days, if intrinsically you don't believe in yourself as you go through that process, then I don't know if it's going to really work out the way that you want it to. Or do you know if that's what you want out of your time in a therapeutic working relationship with someone?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that that's why having these conversations with each other, but also with our children, is so important, is that we can start those new dialogues and ways of thinking early on. Yeah. Is that sort of in line with
Yeah, I
what
think
you're...
so. Because when you say that you've used this book, like, what does that look like? So have you had that with like individual clients or in group settings? So what does it look like right now?
Yeah. So I use it at home with my family. I use it for myself, but I also use it very much with the clients that I'm currently working with. I guess like what you said is that even in getting to know my client, I like to start with celebrating their awesomeness. So celebrating their strengths and talents. So this is a really good way to open up, I think, that conversation and just start that way of looking at themselves. So I'll bring that book in. I'll bring in the book and we'll read through it, and then we'll start to have conversations about, tell me about what's awesome about you. What do you love about yourself? Or maybe you need to start a little bit smaller. What could you love about yourself? Or sometimes you have to start even with a little bit different perspective, because those are hard things to think for ourselves or to know about ourselves. So sometimes I'll say, if your mom or dad were here, or if your best friend was here, what would they say is awesome about you? What do they love about you? And so getting them to maybe think of what someone else would say about them can make it a little bit easier for them to start thinking about those things for themselves. Um, so yeah, that becomes a big part of like developing just a sense of worth and value, and that I see worth and value in them. Like, I want my clients to know that when I'm there, I see so much awesomeness in them. And I truly mean that. I mean, in the book, Grace is one of the pivotal characters who says she believes that every person is amazing, surprising, beautiful, and powerful. And I echo that. I truly believe that. And yes, people make bad choices or may make the wrong choice, but at our essence, I believe that there's beauty within everyone, and everyone has something beautiful, amazing, surprising, and powerful that they can share with the world if they're given the right opportunities, have the right relationships, connections, community, people behind them who are cheering them on. So another big part of the book is about, creating relationships and connections with people who celebrate with you, that are willing to cheer you on for the beliefs and person you are. Because one of the core beliefs at Key Creative is that everybody's uniqueness and differences are worth celebrating. Differences are worth celebrating. And that's at the core of our value system, is that everyone's differences are worth celebrating. And so that's part of the message that I'll also share with my clients, and cheering each other on, finding the people that we can cheer on. Even if we are different, we can still cheer each other on.
Do you find that when you have older clients, like past age 9, we'll say,
Yeah.
who might be like, oh, it's another adult that's coming in to tell me what's wrong with me, or they just don't want to entertain having another like working relationship with some other adult who's going to fix this or that? Like, how do you turn that around?
What I would say to that is that first I would ask them, like, why are they here? So then I would focus more on like the reason that they've wanted to connect with me or wanted to come and um seek our services. So I think it first comes down to that. But then I think it's building blocks. Like, once we figured out, what the challenge is or where they're at and how they feel, I think it's then like small building blocks, or how I like to sometimes think about it is like planting little seeds of like belief. And that's when I would get back to like the idea of practice. Like, something that I'm big on in my practice with clients and in my own life is the concept of practice, which I mentioned earlier, is that, and it's also talked about in the book, that practice is the key to any sort of change, in my opinion, and through the work I've done and the learning that I've had, is that if we want to see change, and if we want to have if we want to see something different, okay, what's the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the same result. So if you want to see something different, if you want a different result, I can help you do that, but only you have to want that first. And if you want that, I can help you, and it's going to require time, effort, and practice. practicing a new way, because our brains are are habitual, right? They get used to doing things in a certain way, and what wires together fires together, and that stays pretty constant until there's a shift or a change in the way we do things. Anyway, there's lots of research about that, but practice is such an important part of shifting our view on ourselves and our view of the world. So if we're talking about shifting a mindset from maybe negative thinking or even distorted thinking into positive thinking, or even maybe just realistic thinking, it starts with, like I said, those building blocks, those small steps. And in the book, some of the reminders that are given. So I also wanted this to be a teaching tool. So in it, I purposely included ways that you can remind yourself that you are awesome. So I don't wake up every day feeling awesome, and I'm sure everyone can agree that they don't either. There's some days I feel terrible about myself. So whether it's how I look or how I speak or my personality, is it too much? Is it too aggressive? Is it whatever it might be, whatever the negative things that I have in my subconscious or even have in my conscious mind, we all struggle with different belief systems that either can serve us or can bring us down. And I believe if we want to bring ourselves up, there's ways to do that. And so we all wake up on those hard days. So in the book, it says on good days, on hard days, every day I'm awesome. And so to be able to believe that within our hearts on good days or hard days, there's ways that I think I keep repeating myself, sorry, but there's ways to remind ourselves. So in the book, some of the ways that you can practice is gratitude. So gratitude is one of the core pieces of my practice and creating positivity around me. And it's the whole idea, the more you celebrate in life, the more there is in life to celebrate. So gratitude, I do that in many different ways, and there's many different ways that you can do it. I do it with our team, our Key Creative team. I do it with different people in my family. I do it with my children. I do it through pictures. I do it through journaling. There's so many ways, through drawings. There's so many different ways that you can express gratitude. And that's a way to shift a way of thinking. The more that you can think about positive things, the more positivity you may see or attract in your sight. Another reminder is the positive affirmations. And it's sort of one of those things I think I sort of judge in a way that it's like, oh, it's just positive affirmations. Like, can those really make a difference? Well, in my life, they have. And especially if you're someone who is used to negative self-talk, and if you understand like the science behind the brain and the development, that if you want to shift that, there needs to be a change. So positive affirmations and reciting them and practicing them, you're reteaching your brain to think and believe differently. So I, throughout my day, have positive affirmations running through my brain. And again, it's something I do daily for myself. And it's also something I do daily with my children. And people might be thinking, I know, like when you hear someone say, do you do it daily? At least maybe I do this judgment. Is that really? Yes. They very much are part of my daily routines. Gratitude every single day, positive affirmations every single day. And now that I have children, it becomes even more important for me because I have a great impact on them. And I don't have a great impact by telling them what to do. I have a great impact by modeling what they can do. And so, every morning, again, I am creative, I am kind, I am beautiful, I am love, I am receptive to all, I am ever expanding, and I am full of abundance. And those penetrate through my system, my veins, my mind. And whether I'm having a good day or hard day, that's the self-talk that I'm choosing to practice. so that the negative thoughts that so easily creep into our mind every day, because we're our worst critics, and really so is everyone else sometimes, that I need to be my biggest cheerleader. And so I practice doing that in that way as well.
Yeah, on that gratitude piece, like something I was like reading recently was, because there's a lot of times that it comes up in like the public discourse and stuff like that, especially with regards to like mental health and like how important that is in terms of kind of like readying someone for those next steps. I know how you were talking about with your client and like someone being like, especially where they might not feel that they're awesome and stuff like that, like that really being the primer of something for them to kind of get to those next steps. And like, someone might stop and say like, wait, I don't feel like this and that. And again, and as soon as that like self-talk is kind of like in there, it's something that it is a barrier. And like, there's always the counters. It's like, well, gratitude, like what about the person who doesn't feel great? They've had a really rough go. Well, the reality is like, you're not trying to say, be thankful for what you have or whichever. It's that kind of like readiness to see those positive outlooks in front of you. And those become the stepping stones towards better opportunity to better yourself, because a lot of the systematic kind of like shedding of the different challenges, and when you're dealing with trauma and other elements of mental health, is understanding those small pieces within yourself. And it's not making you have to like accept a lower standard for yourself. It's accepting that you yourself deserve a better opportunity. And there you can like maybe see those things a little bit better, and in when those opportunities come about, or at the very least that outlook makes you more receptive to the therapeutic goals that you're trying to reach. And so it's one of those, it's a very mixed kind of like bag when people bring that up.
And it's very normal for people to want to reject it if they're not used to it, and to be skeptical whether it actually is going to shift any sort of positivity or ways of you thinking. Like so I just want to normalize that. Like, when I first practiced starting gratitude, it felt very unnatural and it felt forced, and like I was questioning its relevance or its value, or if it really was doing anything for me. But I feel like I can confidently say, after 10 years minimum of like being an active gratitude practicer, I just have a different frame of perspective on things. So it goes back to, yes, there's going to be skepticism. There's going to be questioning of its value. There's going to be discomfort with doing it. And that's okay. You have to, it's just like any new thing. You have to start somewhere. You start somewhere. And so maybe it's just one thing that you choose to see. And even if it is a forcing, that's okay too. And if you're someone who, really wants the evidence-based practice approaches, there's a lot of evidence-based practice on gratitude. So it's not just something that people are shoving down your throats for no reason. I mean, there's a lot of research and value and evidence that's been shown for the power of gratitude. I was working with a client recently, and we have implemented a success journal, and success journals are something that we commonly do in our practice at Key Creative. And it's a way to document our success. So it's same sort of idea like gratitude. You're taking the time to look at your day and find the wins, find the things that went right, or that maybe challenged you and you were able to overcome that challenge, or there was a shift in how you responded to something. Whatever it is, it's an opportunity to celebrate different successes. And we introduced it with this one client. And at first, he was very resistant to it. And I was like, that's okay, that's normal. He doesn't have to do it. We'll do it for him. So again, you can kind of adapt the first step. Maybe if you're working with a client, it doesn't have to be that they're doing it. Maybe you start doing it for them. And so we started doing it for him. And every day we've been adding to this success journal. And I went back there for a visit last week. And I was like, oh, can I read your success journal? And he was like, no, I don't want you to look at it. He was embarrassed, right? Like, there's also this sense of embarrassment too. And I was like, okay, I respect that. I will add to it though. Like I'm going to add to it. And he was okay with that. And I was like, okay, baby steps. We've at least started the process. People are adding. He's not yet comfortable acknowledging the wins or the celebrations. So yesterday I went back to see that same client and I opened up his success journal. I'm like, okay, we're going to add your successes today. And I said, can I read some of your successes from the last few days? And he was like, yeah. And I started reading them and he was so proud. He felt so proud. And then his educational assistant came in, who is a phenomenal person who's been working really closely with him. She said, can I share one of the wins you had, the successes you had? And he was like, yeah, can I tell it? And he shared his win. And so that was a huge shift, like from a couple weeks ago where there's no success journal, he wasn't ready to acknowledge anything. And then we took the step to us just creating the opportunity to celebrate, to people adding those celebrations, to him now being a voice who's part of that. So that's a huge win. And again, it just to look at that, it's baby steps, it's practice. And maybe tomorrow, maybe a year from now, he'll be the one who's writing his success journals. But I think, creating that practice, creating that momentum, creating that habit is what's going to create changes in what he's used to doing, into maybe more positive habits and things that he can do to remember he's an awesome person.
Cause yeah, like when they start off, that first bit is like just accepting, hey, just participating. That's awesome. Like, and the thing is that like, you said, sometimes that's just you writing it in, and that's the create your awesome part of it. It's like, we kind of like hand over hand, almost like guide them to that. And then it becomes that realization of the other hidden message that's in it. Cause if you look at it, it says you is so Y is capitalized, and then the R is capitalized, the you are awesome, and that acceptance and kind of coming full circle.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Mike. Yeah. So I am a big advocate of positive thinking. It's not to mean that you can't have sad or mad or angry feelings. And I feel like there's a misconception that can come around positive thinking. And I've had people come at me like, oh, you're just miss positive, and you don't like, I can't feel any of my feelings because you just want to talk about positive things. Well, that's not true. And that was obviously a relationship that we needed to navigate and grow together, or have a different understanding of each other. But that is not at all what positive thinking is. I think positive thinking is giving yourself an opportunity to see what's right or what could be right, versus choosing to see or focus on what's wrong. And so really, to me, positive thinking is having a choice and making a decision to see what could be right in this situation. How could I approach this in a way that will feel good for me and that will feel good for another person? One of my favorite quotes by Marianne Williamson is, a miracle is a shift or a change in perspective. And to me, that was also just a really like revolutionary way of thinking of miracles, in the way that we commonly think like miracles are like magical, and that only the creator or God or some mystical being can create something like that. When really, everyday people create miracles every day by choosing how they want to view a situation. And that can be from an argument or the way someone's tone, or like, so you can choose to hear something in one way or another, or someone cutting you off. You can view that as someone trying to make you upset, or maybe it's someone who is in a rush somewhere and just wasn't even thinking. And so that's where maybe we give them grace. Anyway, it's different for everyone. Those are just sort of some easy examples for me to think at the top of my mind, because they're challenges that I have sometimes, right? Like that person taking my parking spot, like how dare they? Like they saw me there. Well, like let's be honest, the world doesn't revolve around me, right? Or you but we all revolve together. And I think with a little bit more empathy, compassion, grace, and belief in humanity, we can have everyday miracles in every interaction that we come across. But it comes down to choices. And then what I would say with that, to be able to get to a place to even have to choose to see things in that type of way, it comes with it comes with inner work first.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work.
It takes a lot of work first. So like to go into the world and choose to see someone cutting you off or someone flipping you the bird or whatever it is, like to be able to like not take that personally or turn the other way or have empathy and understanding that it's not about you. In my opinion, for me, there's a lot of inner work that has to come in knowing that I'm valuable, I'm important, I'm amazing, I'm surprising, I'm beautiful, I'm powerful, and no matter what comes at me today, nothing's going to change that. And the belief that everyone's also trying to do their best, right? Like everyone, we see at the tip of the iceberg with people. We just see this little tip of the iceberg. And underneath it is this huge chunk of ice submerged underwater that we don't ever get to see, right? And so people come outside their door with all of these different things that impact who they are and how they respond or react or interact with the world. And that's where that piece of empathy comes into play. Like how important that can be another episode, right? Is just talking about empathy and how powerful that skill is. And that's something else that I like to teach is that empathy is not natural. It's not, at least it's not natural for me. Like it's a skill and it's a willingness to choose to see a situation or a person or an event in a certain way by having understanding, having more understanding for what someone else may be feeling or thinking or experiencing underneath the surface of it all.
Well, I like to think of it a little bit as kind of like grace, like when it comes down to it, like, there's all the things that can influence you. And yes, there's a choice element of it. But the reality is for some people, they're not even in a place to make that choice. They're so reactive. And that whole idea of something cascading, like starting their day, having something really, negative influencing them there. And then that's something that they themselves can translate into other elements of their life. But on the other side of it is if you have that empathy and kind of like that self-actualization around that, you might find yourself in a place where you can have that empathy for others. You can have that grace to just kind of resolve that situation, step forward, be a bit more resilient.
Yeah. Mike, thank you for sharing that. Because I think that like if you are in a position where you can have that type of empathy and grace and understand that some people are not in that position and some people's brains have developed in a way that their fear response doesn't give them an opportunity to think before they respond, then we can give a lot of people space and understanding to avoid maybe further conflicts or hurt or pain, right? So I love that. I love that acknowledgement. And I think that's so important. I mean, I drive down 97th Street so many times and see the people living on the streets and think of the different traumas and impacts and pain that they have in their lives that make it hard for them to be at their best. And a lot of times it's not their fault. The reasons why they're in the situation they are, they didn't choose that. No one chooses, necessarily to be in that situation. So empathy is such a key part of that.
Yeah.
And some of us have the capability to do that, right? And some of us don't.
Yeah. And the reality is some people are going to spend that time or they have the opportunity of their circumstances to get to that point for themselves, but then some others aren't necessarily. And, that's something I know with your own practice here. Like I remember the story years back when there had been someone in front of, which is now Pitswami, or
Which
sorry, I'm mispronouncing it. In front of the
Oh,
the shop, but
the game
before
shop.
when it was like the rhythm studio, I think is
Yeah,
what
yeah,
it
yeah,
had
yeah,
been.
yeah. The belly dancing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and there was the person who was kind of on the street, and like, you know, they were there, and you had kind of gone up to them and seeing like, you know, what they needed, and they were like just flabbergasted at the fact that you kind of like treated them like as an individual, and other people were like, you know, dealing with it. But that's the thing is having that opportunity of looking at it like that. And that's something that, you know, I know where we are here, we're trying to model that in our community and stuff like that. That's one of the reasons why actually I really appreciate our neighbors with the pawn shop, because like we'll see people who are in crisis and suffering, and like they'll make sure that they have water, or, you know, some guys it's just even just a smoke, and treating them like they're part of that community, because they're in that fight or flight and of their reality.
Yeah.
And so someone giving them that opportunity, even though it might not be the therapy or support that they actually need at that time, it's the best dignity and the best opportunity to give them something that's that grace.
Yeah.
Right. So
And something that might just spark some light into their day. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always think of that. Like, I have this book, Find Your Sparkle. And it's not necessarily about like, well, it is about finding your spark and sharing your sparkle. And I often think, like, what little sparkles can I be putting out there today? Like, what part of my awesomeness can I share? You know, so when I step outside of my door, I'm like, how can I share my awesome? Like, how can I do that today for someone who may not feel that for themselves, or just even for myself? Like, it doesn't have to be about someone else either. It could just be about me celebrating my awesomeness, and that's okay too. Um, One other thing I wanted to maybe talk about or mention before we wrap up today is um, just that idea of meaning and purpose in life. We were having a bit of a conversation before we started this episode today about purpose and meaning, and I shared with you guys how I've had quite a few students come up to me over the last couple months asking me, like, what's the meaning of life, or like what's the purpose? And just being sort of blown away, one, with that's such a big question, and two, I can totally relate, you know, and how in so many ways with having that question for myself. um and I know probably 10 years ago, if not a little bit more, I really struggled with that question. So I was in my either late 20s, early 30s, um, where I was really questioning, like, what's my meaning? What's my purpose? And I was comparing myself to other people, like seeing that, oh, they have such a purpose, and they have these strengths and these talents that are so tangible, and they know exactly what they want to do. And I felt like I didn't have these talents or these things to share with other people, because I always saw that it was something outside of myself. But after I had done a lot of personal, exploration and development and growth, and I was working with a coach at that time, and still see a counselor today who helps me with keeping with my beliefs, that I grew the foundation with back then, was that purpose doesn't have to be what you do. Purpose, you can relook at your purpose, and it can be, who do I want to be? And to me, that shift in looking at purpose was gave me my purpose. So instead, I didn't have to think like, I can do this, I can do that, I can have this talent. I thought, I want to be an energetic, feisty, a strong, confident woman who shares her rainbow of colors with all the world. She's someone who listens when someone has a problem. She's a shoulder to cry on. She's someone who believes in humanity and giving back. She's someone who celebrates differences, and that she fights for those who may not have a voice, or for those who may not have the ability to stand up for themselves. And so when I shifted my purpose to, rather than it being what I need to do, to being who I want to be, I started to create opportunities to share that and to be that. And through that, I was living my purpose. I had my meaning, and it relieved some of that pressure of me doing things for outside of myself. And it gave me permission to do things within myself, and that I was finding rewards in that. So for anyone questioning their purpose, my belief is that you're probably already living it. And if you're not sure what it is, maybe look inside rather than outside and define that for yourself. Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And I truly believe, like Grace says in the book, that every person is amazing, surprising, beautiful, and powerful, and that everybody's awesomeness is worth celebrating. And my true wish and hope for our world and for people is that we can see that within ourselves, that we can remind ourselves that we are, and that through reminding ourselves that we can believe that we are. And that if someone needs help, that we can help lift them up in that belief. We can take their hand and we can go with them together. And if it's just adding a little sparkle to their day to brighten it up, that's awesome. Yeah.
Amazing. This podcast is brought to you by the word awesome.
Yeah, maybe last thing I would add to that, like I've mentioned a lot of different ways that I incorporate awesome into, or practicing being awesome into my routines. You may or may not have noticed that I have it everywhere. I have it everywhere. I have it literally everywhere. And that is completely on purpose, because the more I practice it, the more I surround myself with it, the more I believe it. And I do. And I do. And that doesn't mean that it's easy. And it doesn't mean I don't have hard days. It just means I have a focus on that I have a purpose of sharing my amazing, surprising, beautiful, and powerful self. And that starts with me loving and celebrating me and my awesomeness. So I got it all over. And if you come to my house, you'll see it all over there too.
In the several years that I've been here with Key, I've only, the first book that I saw was My Name is Trauma. And all these years later, now we have I Am Awesome. And we know that bringing a book to reality is no small feat. Like, you had maybe those initial inspirations of those Post-it notes on in your clinical documentation, whatever, that eventually turned into hiring an illustrator or actually writing out the storyline for this book, and self-publishing, which is also a massive, massive feat. And now you probably have thousands of books ready to be sent out into the world. But for all of that effort, we got to know the why.
Coming back to the belief system and choosing to know and believe that you are awesome, you'll grow stronger each day. You will go stronger each day. And so I self-published this book, and I have copies, and I feel so good when I get to share it with someone, when I get to say, like, this is my belief and I believe in you. Like, I believe in you. And I actually am going to be, oh, this is going to bring me to tears. I'm going to be, don't kneel. I'm going to cry. Sorry.
It's okay. You know,
I know I'm one of those people who, when I see someone crying and then they say sorry, I'm like, don't say sorry. Like, just cry.
No,
Or I'm not going to cry. Well, I am going to cry. I'm probably going to cry a lot, but, I don't know why I printed so many copies. I just knew how important that message is for so many people, not only myself, and how so many young people need to hear this message and believe this message. And I've recently connected with Little Warriors, which is an amazing organization that has a facility called the Be Brave Ranch that provides therapy, support, and housing for children who have been sexually abused. And I have the honor of being supervised for my clinical practice by Wanda, and she's their clinical director. Anyway, I get to donate 100 books to this organization. And I told her, like, I don't know, I have these books and I love them and I sell some and they're in bookstores and that's all great. But for me to be able to donate 100 books and that will be able to be given to each one of their kids that come there for a year is probably the most fulfilling thing that I could do with this book. In the hopes that, and yeah, that message will resonate or connect with someone through that, passing it along. So, yeah, that's my take-home message. The process of writing this frickin' book from the Post-it notes took literally a year, you guys. And me going back and forth with Heather Moyes and like her like actually being like, maybe you should switch the whole thing and should it like, and I had these sheets like spread out all over my craft room and like scribbling out, like it was unbelievable and I sat and I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, why am I doing this? And I mean, again, it goes back to what the response ultimately was, but I definitely had that moment where I'm like, I have printed hundreds of copies of this book. I have made like what felt like thousands of revisions on the editing part and not even speaking of like the design, layout, illustration part, which Jessa is an incredible designer, illustrator, and collaborator. So I was extremely blessed and grateful to have her to work with. But how many, revisions and edits she did throughout the process, I questioned. There was one pivotal time that I questioned, like, why am I doing this? But it went back to just that response that it just was, I knew this was something in my heart and in my soul that I needed to let out and share with the world. And that I don't know what the answer for it will be or what the reception will be, but I knew I had to do it. It was just, I knew I had to do, versus like having a plan of what it would be. I just knew I had to do it. And so that's what kept me going. And I had, like I had mentioned, Heather Moyes, who's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, motivational speaker, author, incredible. She's in the Rugby Hall of Fame, just an incredible, inspiring woman who was willing to help me throughout this process. And I also had another incredible person who has supported me with this book, Crystal Lightning. She's a Canadian Screen Award winner in, what year was it? For Best Actress. I think it was a couple of years ago. Anyway, if you're looking for someone to cheer you on, she is someone who will cheer you on. I approached her, I shared the book, and in a instant, she was like, I got you, girl. Like, I will support you 100%. I believe in you and I'm here to cheer you on. And she's done just that from day one. So I'm super grateful to those two women who have supported me on the back end also.
That sounds like a good time to do the whoosh.
Yeah, let's do the whoosh.
All right.
Bringing it in.
All right.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Whoosh.
Potatoes, fries, potatoes. We're going to teach you guys this.
Key Talks is a project of Key Creative. We hope you found this episode informative, thought-provoking, and enjoyable. To learn more about the topics covered in this episode, visit our website at keycreative.com. That's QICreative.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving us a rating and review. It helps other people discover our show and lets us know what we're doing right. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.